Okay, well, let me start by thanking the organizers for inviting me today. So what we do, what Evonetix does, is to develop a radically different approach to gene synthesis. It's actually a highly parallel desktop platform, so a DNA writer, accessible to every researcher. And the question to ask is, why is this important? And the answer is, because we face huge challenges that biology can help solve, but this requires the ability to synthesize DNA at unprecedented accuracy, scale, and speed, which is where we come in. So I ask people to imagine a world in which biology is harnessed to solve some of our greatest problems. This might mean, for example, in petroleum, reducing our dependency on petroleum. The petrochemicals industry, for example, is a $750 billion industry, and many of those products can be made biologically. In food and agriculture, we have a world population of 7.7 billion, and that's set to increase to around 11 billion over the coming decades, with a need for sustainable food production, and synthetic biology, or biology, can help create new crop plants, new fertilizers, new animal genetics. In healthcare, there's the prospect of making new antibodies, novel vaccines, producing drugs biologically, gene editing technologies, and so on and so forth. And there's even the prospect of storing data on DNA. But the problem we have is that how DNA is currently made and supplied limits the progress of some of these ambitious projects. For example, it's a service model only. There's slow turnaround, so you may have to wait weeks or months to get your DNA that you require. There are high error rates, typically with synthesis, 1 in 200, and I'll come back to error rates later. There are sequence limitations, so many sequences cannot be synthesized. Typically GC-rich sequences or sequences that contain repeats are problematic. Long DNA is difficult and expensive, and importantly, researchers are not in control of their own experiments. So this affects workflows and how experiments can be done. So we need a desktop platform to synthesize DNA at unprecedented accuracy, scale, and speed. Biology, or synthetic biology as we often call it these days, has gone mainstream, as evidenced by the April cover of The Economist. There is, I think, an understanding of the opportunities that biology can offer. The Royal Society, in its 2017 report, said there's growing awareness that synthetic biology can help solve some of the planet's issues, some resource issues. And we believe that we can provide some of the solution as well by providing an integrated desktop platform, by allowing the rapid prototyping to accelerate the evolution of new genes and pathways, by making biological engineering as accessible and as widespread as next generation sequencing. And this is what we call third generation gene synthesis. So our DNA writer that you see here, we haven't yet made it, but this is the product of an industrial design process, so it will look like this. Will place DNA synthesis in the hands of every researcher. It'll provide accurate, scalable, rapid DNA synthesis, and it'll change how DNA is accessed, made, and used. So it'll be a new paradigm for DNA synthesis. So how are we going about this? There are three key components of our approach. Firstly, a silicon chip made using MEMS technology that will contain many thousand reaction sites or pixels, up to 10,000 on a chip the size of the palm of your hand, each with independent control, and that independent control is thermal. So each with independent thermal control. And we use that thermal control to synthesize DNA at each of those reaction sites, strands of DNA. Then again, we use that thermal control to assemble double-stranded DNA in a process that removes the errors as the assembly takes place. So it's very important that we are able to make DNA that is error-free, or that has very, very few errors. And I'm showing the importance of this on this slide. Conventionally, what happens is oligonucleotides are synthesized and then they are mixed together in a soup. There is no prospect of removing the errors. What this means is that by the time you get to about a kilobase of DNA, of double-stranded DNA, given an error rate of 1 in 200, which is what you get with conventional phosphoramidite chemistry, conventional synthetic approaches, you end up with very, very little correct DNA, a yield of virtually zero. And this is problematical if you want to make long DNA, and many of the synthetic biology projects that I'm talking about will require DNA in the sort of 5 to 30, perhaps even longer kilobase range. However, the error removal process that we're developing will solve this problem, enabling us to generate high fidelity long DNA by removing the errors before they're incorporated, and by improving the accuracy by several orders of magnitude, and allowing us hopefully then to address this emerging opportunity presented by synthetic biology across healthcare and pharma, industrial chemicals, food and ag, data storage potentially, each of which is clearly a massive market. So where are we in this process? This slide gives you an indication of where we've got to. Well, we have our thermal control chips with the right dimensions, with a limited number of pixels. It's taken us 3 years to develop these chips. The critical component of these chips is their thermal characteristics and the way in which they're processed using MEMS technology. We've synthesized DNA using our thermal control chemistry, thermally labile reagents, and we're now demonstrating that we can remove errors in the assembly process. So what this means is the distance to our first products is now hopefully short.